All right, bell work today. Free foods from the Middle East. Mr. Glick is actually going to talk a lot about foods from the Middle East. So today, we don't want to spend too much time on this. Yes, Ms. Barnes.
Hummus?
Just give us one. Hummus, right? That's a good one. We're going to get a chance to experience some hummus in a couple weeks. We're going to watch little Lawrence of Arabia and then experience some hummus. So if you haven't tried it before, you'll get an opportunity. You don't have to eat it, but you're missing out if you haven't experienced it. It's good stuff. All right, another one, Miss Rosinski.
It's not green.
Mr. Bloomer. Mr. Bloomer. Miss Barnes.
A lot of different.
Mr. Bloomer.
This is awesome.
Miss Rosinski.
Okay, grilled halloumi.
What is this?
Not your typical grilled cheese.
All right, so
Is it challah? H-O-L-L-A-H?
Yeah.
H-A-L-L-O-U-M-I.
Yeah.
is it goat cheese?
I would think challah is just kind of bread.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
All right, another one, Miss Greta. One more.
I had
Falafels.
falafel.
Falafels. Yep. Those are good ones. I think Mr. Gillespie's going to talk about that one as well. All right, 3 popular figures from the Middle East. You come across any. Do a Google search. Miss Kaufman.
Richard the Lionheart.
Richard the Lionheart. Interesting. So, that's like our reflective of our Eurocentric type of mindset. So you know how we talk about ethnocentrism, judging another culture based upon the standards of one's own, right? We think of ourselves as being superior. We have a tendency to be Eurocentric as well, meaning that all of our history has a tendency to have a European perspective to it, and a European bias to it. So in this particular case, Richard Lionheart, he's not even Middle Eastern, he's not Arabic or anything like that, but he did spend some time in the Middle East during the Crusades, and so maybe that's why he came up there. So maybe you could put Crusades down as an answer to question number 3, area of conflict in the Middle East. But he was fighting against another guy named Saladin for control of Jerusalem there. So he ended up having to leave the Crusades and go back and create some type of peace treaty with Saladin before he left. But he was in the Middle East. Another one, Drew. Suleiman.
Yeah.
Who's this guy? I'm not familiar with this guy. No, Mr. Glick?
I believe that's who Richard Lionheart was fighting in the Crusades.
Okay, so another name for Saladin. Interesting.
I think that was the European, because they gave him
The European.
not a European name. But
Yep. I understand what you're saying there. Good stuff. Others, does anyone have anything else? Maybe more recent history other than the Crusades? Ms. Martins?
Charles V.
Charles V?
V? Fifth?
Yep.
What's the difference?
So it'd be a Roman numeral. There. So again, we've got a lot of European perspective here. I'm going to give you a couple. All right. First off, we talked about this guy just the other day with 9/11, the terrorist that led Al Qaeda's efforts to lead the attacks on September 11th. What was it, Mr. Bloomer? Osama bin Laden. So you can write his name down there. Okay. He's a popular. You don't have to necessarily be a good guy to be on this particular list, right? There's another guy that was head of ISIS, and there's some suspicion that he's still alive. We've had some attempts to remove him, eliminate him as a whole. But the leader of ISIS, his name is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Right? We say al-Baghdadi. That reminds us that he's a terrorist. Right? So Abu Bakr is spelled Abubakr. Abu Bakr. You had that?
Yeah.
Sweet. Abu Bakr is a very common name in Middle Eastern cultures. Al-Baghdadi is what separates him from the rest of the Abu Bakrs. Al-Baghdadi, A-L-B-A-G-D-A-D-I. Al-Baghdadi. It's an important name. We're going to reference him quite a few more times over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you make a mental note of that. And maybe one more. You got another one, Carson?
Abdul Ghani, I think it is. I don't know. Never mind.
Okay.
That's not the right one.
I'll give you one more. Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the current leader, Prime Minister of Israel. Netanyahu. If you start Googling Prime Minister of Israel. You'll find him. He's in the current of a little election crisis over there in Israel. Okay? All right, areas of crisis. So we've got the Crusades established. We have others. Yes, Ms. Coughlin.
Iran.
So what about Iran?
It's on the list.
Okay, let's say like either our current conflict with Iran, with this nuclear power, nuclear energy, nuclear weapons deal that we have, and that we've kind of taken away. So that would be an issue, and that all kind of goes back to the Iranian Revolution.
So is it both Iran and Iraq?
Just Iran in this particular case, right? When we're relating to the United States. But there was a period of time where Iran, and Iraq were in a long, drawn-out war, decades-long war between the two of them. And that preceded some other conflict that we got involved in. Ms. Genesis? So, conflict with Egypt. I think you could think about the revolution that's taken place in Egypt most recently. There's a lot of democracy. We thought it was a good thing. A lot of revolutions, but it led to a lot of unrest and even more conflict thereafter. So some of it's been good, some of it has caused more problems. Ms. Folks, got another example? Yeah, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I mentioned Netanyahu. So he's right in the middle of that idea that the Palestinians want to have their own nation, but the Palestinians are actually inside of Israel. So there's a lot of conflict between those two groups. It's kind of reflective in, if you're an Israeli, you don't have to be a follower of Judaism. They have a tendency to have that connection there. And if you're a Palestinian, you don't have to be a Muslim, but there's a strong connection between Islam and the Palestinians. So you see some conflict between the two groups there. Are there any other areas of conflict? We have three. We have three written down. Do we need any more? We've got three. All right, very good. Let's go ahead and change modes, and let's get to our word of the day. All right, emaciated is our word of the day today. Emaciated. Can you see still? Do I need to leave lights on?
No, it's good. It's great.
Good? Right.
Yeah.
Thin and weak is our first two synonyms. Healthy is our antonym. Although the prisoners of war were fed 3 meals a day, many of them still looked emaciated and hungry. This particular image is from a film called Bridge on the River Kwai. And it kind of reflects this idea of civilizing the uncivilized and the white man's burden. These British soldiers were actually prisoners of war. They willingly gave themselves up, according to some of the characters in the movie, just so that they could, in the prisoner of war camp, civilize the Japanese warriors or Japanese soldiers, their opponents, opposition in World War II, because they, in their perspective, they said that they weren't doing things the right way, and that even as prisoners, that they could teach them how to do things the right way. Okay? We'll maybe look at that film a little bit later on this semester. We have one more synonym: thin, weak, and Miss Good. Thin, weak, and Miss Bloomer.
Brutal?
Brutal. Yep, you could say it's just brutal. Right? Sickly. It's not good. Part of speech. Tyler? Verb you guess? Want to guess again? Adjective. Yep. Described as emaciated, thin, and weak. Alright, healthy. Antonyms. Hadley? Strong. Hadley? Strong and healthy, and in our culture we think of this word as being negative, but a lot of times it's actually, historically in the past, it was actually has a positive connotation to it. It begins with an F. Fat. Fat would be a good antonym. Again, a lot of times we think of the word fat as being negative, but historically, fat meant wealthy, right? It meant healthy, is what it meant. Okay. All right. Our sentence context. You guys remember the young activist, female activist that's fighting for, attention to climate change and environmentalism? You remember her name? Miss Greta?
Greta Thunberg.
Yep, Greta Thunberg. Very good. So this article kind of relates to that idea. It's titled "The Solution for Climate Pollution." Kind of rhymes. Copenhagen is trying to remove as much carbon from the atmosphere as it emits. The city's plan may offer a roadmap for fighting climate change. So this Copenhagen is a city in know what country in Europe is. I'll give you a hint. It begins with a D. Copenhagen and yes, Denmark. Very good. So this is kind of like an example of what you're probably going to see happen. Probably first off, more and more often in Europe, and then it's probably going to expand, and you're going to see this in other places around the world as well. Okay, cities are probably going to transition to doing this more and more often. This Copenhagen used to be an industrial city. There were factories in the narrow streets and ships in the oil-stained harbor. Electricity came from smoke-emitting coal-fired power plants, and the air was smoggy. Today, Denmark's capital has been transformed into a much more environmentally friendly place. Offshore wind turbines generate much of the city's electricity. Bicycle paths are 3 lanes wide on busy streets to accommodate the 43% of Copenhageners who regularly commute to work or school by bike. A new train line opening this year will put most residents within a half mile of a train station, reducing the need to drive. These are some stats concerning Denmark and Copenhagen. 233 miles of bike lanes in Copenhagen by itself. 233 miles of bike lanes. That's crazy, right? 54%. That's the percentage of Denmark's electricity that comes from renewable energy. That's compared with the United States. Anybody know what percentage of our energy comes from renewable energy? They have 54%. We have 14%. Right? So they have beat us by quite a bit there. Now remember, Denmark's a little bit smaller than what we have here in the United States, so you need to take that into consideration. 75%, that's the 2025 goal for the percentage of trips in Copenhagen taken by foot, bike, or public transit. Do you think we could ever get to that point where we get away from using our vehicles and start to go by train, bike, or by foot?
Nope.
No.
No?
We're too lazy.
I think it would be a challenge. We'd have to be re-socialized in the way that we think about, the vehicle is a reflection of the American identity, an American cultural symbol. We'd have to change the way we think about it.
Yeah,
Right?
because if we have it, we're obviously going to
Exactly. Make a good point there. All right. That's our sentence context. Let's make sure we've got a series of 3, right? 3 verbs, 3 nouns, 3 phrases. Stay away from 3 adjectives. And make sure you got emaciated in our sentence. Sound good? Denmark and Copenhagen. Denmark, Copenhagen. Sound good? Go ahead and take your sentence and share with the person in front, person behind you. Make sure you're listening for those 3 items. 3 verbs, 3 nouns.
Wow, this is like really good.
I was so off on that. No, I was so off.
You hear it?
Yes, nothing.
What's new?
I said it was really good. What?
I see what you're doing.
I should be an actor. Peppa. That better be Peppa.
She'd own the star.
Is it Patrick? Well, Patrick's the star, so.
Alright, Cameron, what you got so far?
If we want to be the opposite of the word, we could like bike or like run places.
Okay? If we want to be the opposite of the world,
The emaciated.
opposite of emaciated, comma, because that's a complex sentence, right?
Yeah.
We could bike, walk, or
Run to a destination.
run to our destination.
Yeah.
Right? Not bad. So the idea is that even though you're getting exercise and burning calories, it's healthy, right? It's a healthier transition. And keep it us from being emaciated. Alright, good stuff. Let's go ahead and transition. You may want to take out a sheet of notebook paper. Mr. Glick is going to introduce us norms, more specifically food cultural norms with the Middle East. Sound good?
Have you like been to the Middle East? Is that what you're
I have not been to the Middle East, no. I just have a computer so I can do research, and then I just like, no.
Oh, roasted. It's obviously like type of one.
I do like Middle Eastern food though, like hummus and falafel.
Pita?
Oh, pita's good.
What's disgusting?
Whatever you just said.
All this stuff, if you don't know what I just said, how do you know it's disgusting?
Hummus is like gross.
Hummus is
Tastes
gross.
like hummus.
Does it have vegetables?
Allie, you told hummus was great.
It tastes like full on.
I don't eat that though.
No, hummus doesn't. Hummus is like a, we will learn what hummus is. Alright, so, to get started, as Mr. Miller said, we're going to be talking about foods in the Middle East. So just for a hot sec, we're going to take a look at the map of the Middle East. Now the Middle East is this massive region that we kind of just, when we say the Middle East, we basically assume we're talking about this area right here, right? Syria, Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, these are the troubled areas that we hear a lot about. But in actuality, the Middle East is everything from Egypt here all the way over to Pakistan, which borders India. This whole region here is technically the Middle East, and it's this massively diverse area with hundreds and hundreds of people groups, tribes. It's one of the oldest areas that people live in. If you guys take Western Civ with Miss Birchie, you'll learn about the rise of civilization in the Fertile Crescent, and that is this area right here. So this area right here is where humanity and human civilization really first took off. So they have a really old and rich tradition when it comes to foods. So do you guys know what like the food pyramid is? How we break the foods that we should eat up into like breads, fruits, vegetables, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the approach we're going to take when looking at this. We're going to look at grains and vegetables and fruits and meats that people in the Middle East eat. And as I said, it's a very diverse area. So what we're going to cover here is not representative of everyone and everything. But what it is kind of this short list that we can look at that's going to help us generalize the types of foods that are eaten in the Middle East. So the first thing we're going to look at are grains and pulses. Does anyone know what a pulse is? Other than your heart rate? No, I did not either. I had to look. You know? Meat? No. So what a pulse is a pulse is just a dried seed of a legume. Now a legume is like peanuts and peas and lentils. And so over here on the right side is a list of pulses. And what those are is basically do you guys know what lentils are? Anybody ever eat lentil soup or lentil stew? Or vegetarians, you get like lentil burger patties, whatever. So basically,
It's like substitute for like real meat. So
yep.
it's made
So
out of
you can use it as
grains
it's
and
a
stuff.
real good source, really high in protein, really high in iron, really high in fiber. And these things are so important to the culture of the Middle East because they're what you would call like a booster. So if you have a stew that you're making, you can throw a bunch of pulses in, and it's going to greatly increase not only the amount of food that you can produce, but the caloric content of that food. The way that we add rice into soups, that's how they would use pulses. They would use things like fava beans, lentils, chickpeas, and split peas to help supplement their dietary needs. So grains and pulses, these are the two most important things to a Middle Eastern diet. They're the foods that they're going to be eating the most. So you see on the grain side, we have wheat, rice, barley. Now wheat production first originated in the Middle Eastern area. So it was one of the very first agricultural plants that humans domesticated. So growing wheat in this area has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So to them, bread, this is where bread originated from. So bread also holds a very significant part of the Middle Eastern diet, much the way it does in America, right? We eat cereals for breakfast, we eat grains with lunch, we eat grains with dinner, we eat grains for snacks. We love grains because they're high in sugar. So next we're going to be looking at vegetables. Vegetables, these are going to be the next biggest component of a Middle Eastern diet. The way that here in America we say vegetables should be the second most consumed part of your diet, the same goes for vegetables in the Middle East. Can someone tell me why vegetables are A, cheap, and B, easy to get?
Because no one eats them.
That's a good reason. There's always leftover vegetables. But I'm thinking more before we cook the vegetables. Where do you get vegetables at?
The farm.
The farm, yes. The garden. So these are things that you can grow in your backyard. For relatively little money, you can get seeds and you can irrigate and you can have a food source that's easily accessible for you.
Too much work.
It is work, and that's why we're not all farmers.
Don't eat it.
So, the interesting thing, the one that I want you to take away from this, is if we look at these top three vegetables, tomatoes, eggplants, and squash. What?
Isn't tomato a fruit?
Yeah, technically, but, you know, whatever. Or whatever. Quick critique in my presentation. So tomatoes, eggplants, and squash, these things are really key to the Middle Eastern diet, but these are not Middle Eastern foods. If you guys know anything about squash and tomatoes, these are New World foods. They only grew in North and South America prior to Columbus reaching the New World. They were brought back to Europe, and so you can see that the Middle Eastern food, it pulls. It's at the middle of the in between Europe and in between Asia, so it's got this really cool pulling from a little bit from Asia, pull a little bit from Europe, and make something new out of it. The same with eggplants. That is a distinctly Asian food that has migrated and made its way into the Middle Eastern culture. So it's kind of, you guys know the melting pot theory with regards to immigration in America, how we all kind of come together and get a little bit of this and a little bit of that to make something distinctly American. Same goes for food in the Middle East. Next, we're going to be looking at fruits. Now, these are not fruits that we think of as fruits, right? Olives, I had no idea that an olive was a fruit until I was looking at this. And it is. It grows on a tree, and it has a pit, a seed inside. So technically, it's qualified as a fruit. And it is one of the largest, one of the most important fruits that is produced in this region. Dates, figs, and olives all grow on trees. They're all native to the Middle Eastern region. And these are all really large exports. You guys think we use a lot of olive oil in cooking? We get our olive oil from the Middle Eastern region. The only other fruit that I saw that is kind of, we use in our culture is citrus. We use a lot of limes, lemons, and oranges. They also use a lot of limes and lemons, and then they grow a bunch of other citrus foods that we just don't have here. So that's why I didn't bother to put them up there, because I didn't know what they were. Figured you wouldn't either. Next. There we go, meat. So the main meat that is consumed in the Middle East is lamb and mutton. That's the same, it's just a lamb is a young sheep and a mutton is an old sheep. So those are the two, that is the primary source of meat in the Middle East for their diet. They also eat a significant amount of chicken. But what you will not find throughout most of the Middle East is pork. So you will not see things like bacon, ham, sausage if you go to a restaurant. Does anyone know why there is no pork in the Middle East?
Their religion.
Their religion. Thank you very much. Whose religion? Jews and Muslims. Yes, both Jews and Muslims. In the Jewish and Islamic religions, it is forbidden to eat pork products. So you will not see the pig as an animal in the Middle East. Also notice, no beef. Right? In America, beef and chicken are the two largest meat sources that we eat. They do not have beef. Mainly, I think it's because the terrain and the environment is not conducive for beef growing. Beef. Do you grow cows? Grow cows? You don't grow cows?
I think they sprout.
They sprout? You gotta water? All right, last category we're going to be looking at is beverages. The two omnipresent beverages in the Middle East are coffee and tea. You're going to find these beverages at almost every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack. What you're not going to find mostly is alcohol. I have it here with an asterisk because there are very specific places you're going to find alcohol. Similar to the pork situation, Islamic law, or the Islamic religion, frowns upon alcohol. They do not consume, strict Muslims do not consume alcohol. Where you will find alcohol is in groups that are not Islamic. So the Jewish populations will consume alcohol, and then some more moderate, less conservative factions of the Islamic religion do allow alcohol consumption. But I put it up here because alcohol is pretty important to the story of the Middle East, because this is where fermentation as a science really took off. People in this area have been producing beers and wines and other distilled beverages for thousands and thousands of years. But with the rise of Islam, it has since fallen out of favor. So now we're going to take a look at some food. So as you guys said earlier, we talked about hummus.
No, it's
Who has had hummus? Yeah? A couple people, do we like it? Do we not like it?
Yeah.
Yes. You guys eat it with veggies or pita, just with your hands, just like
Ew.
I ate it
scooping
with my
up.
finger and it tasted like leaves.
Tasted like leaves?
Why did it
So, yeah, why did it taste like leaves?
That's
What it
not
should have
good.
tasted like is chickpeas. So hummus, remember back we talked about pulses. Chickpeas is a pulse. So what they'll do is they'll grind up chickpeas and mix it with a sesame paste called tahini. And then they'll season it in a variety of different ways. You can put, I know if you go to like Kroger or Aldi, you can find like black bean hummus, red pepper hummus, garlic hummus, any kind of flavoring you could think to put in, they do. And then as I said, they'll eat this stuff with veggies, they'll eat it with pita, they'll use it like you would like a mayonnaise, they'll put it on sandwiches. It's a spread/topping that has recently, I believe, made its way to our Western culture. Like, as when I was your guys' age, like, nobody ate hummus, and now you can't like go anywhere without finding it. It's like my wife's favorite thing. Next, we're going to talk about falafel. Falafel, do you guys know what hush puppies are? Yeah, so little deep fried batter balls. So falafel is kind of like a hush puppy. It's a deep fried ball that's been made from ground chickpeas and ground fava beans. Again, we're seeing pulses. We're seeing how they utilize pulses in their food. These things are heavily spiced because chickpeas and fava beans, guess what? They don't taste very good. They're pretty bland. So they heavily spice these things. They serve them on a pita. They make a sandwich out of them. And they'll serve it on a pita with an assortment of accompaniments, usually like pickled veggies, some kind of cream sauce, maybe a little tomato, a little mint, a little cilantro, things of that nature. Next, we're going to be looking at what's called kofta or kabobs. You guys know? Go back.
Sorry.
You don't really need to get all this stuff written down.
Oh.
This will not be. I don't know if it's. I don't know. I'm not going to test you on it. So I don't know. Mr. Miller might though. So you may want to
It
write.
might be on our question.
He's over there writing test questions right now. So I'm really going to get the kids. All right. Can we move on?
Yeah.
We good?
Yeah.
All right, next we're going to be looking at kofta or kabobs. Do we know what a kebab is?
Yeah.
What is a kebab?
These
Somebody.
stick.
You know what a kebab is?
Yeah.
It's a stick. It's a stick with
No,
stuff on it.
Yes, yeah. So meat that's been cooked on a stick, right? So the purpose of the stick is so that you can put it on the grill. So if you'll see these little things, it's kind of like a meatball / meatloaf. Think ground meat with a bunch of seasonings that have been packed together. These ones here on the right, they're long and skinny. And the picture's not great, but you can see there's holes in them where the stick was. So you put a stick through there so that way you can set it on top of a grill over a fire to let them cook. And then when they take them out, they just pull the stick out. And then they also, if they go more with the like a meatball fashion, they often serve it with gravy and rice, and then they'll use like a pita, make a sandwich, eat it in all kinds of ways. These again are heavily seasoned. That is something you're going to find in Middle Eastern culture, is they use a lot of seasoning. They were the middleman between Europe and the Spice Islands. So like Columbus, he was out looking for the Spice Islands, right? Because he wanted to circumvent the Middle East. So that is one of the reasons they use a lot of spices, because they have that rich tradition of it. Last thing we're going to look at is this dessert called baklava. Baklava is basically it's made from this thing called phyllo dough, which kind of works like a puff pastry, where it puffs up as you cook it, and it gets really like these thin layers. You know, like a good biscuit. It's got like good layers in it. That's what a lot of what baklava is. And then they jam it full of nuts and honey, And this dessert, in some form or another, has been produced for over 2,000 years in the area. It is insanely old. If you know anything about Western Civ, it goes back to the time of the Greeks and the Turks when they were fighting over the city of Troy. That's how long this dessert, baklava, has been produced. So yeah, I guess, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? No? Alright, we're gonna head down to the library to do a little like activity with all this stuff. So if you want to go ahead and grab your backpacks, we will dismiss from the library. So bring all your stuff with us. Meet at the stage area. We will go to the stage and then I'll tell you what we're gonna do. There's like a, yeah, you like walk into the library and like back against the wall.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Elevated floor.
The elevated floor.